through, but
Professor Hochanjilo's একটা কথা বলেন না খুব সুন্দর, that world has never seen so much of wealth in a lifetime what we see now. So that means the world is becoming much more chaotic and whatnot. So much of wealth, so much of education, and so much of instability.
Good morning to all of you.
Sir, good morning, sir. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. You are looking fresh, sir, today. Very fresh.
Thank you.
Sir, assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam.
আজকে আপনার থেকে স্যার বে অফ বেঙ্গলের হাউ টু ক্রিয়েট দ্য হানি সো দ্যাট দ্য ফ্লাই ক্যান কাম ইন, এটার এক্সপ্লেনেশনটা দরকার আছে স্যার।
ওটা তো সাহাব ভালো পারবে।
oh, sir.
He sits around honey all the time, so
Too much bees these days, sir.
Too much bees. Too much bees.
And his love for food is extraordinary. So,
Shahab is a new pair of glass that make the whole face change. Shall we start in time?
we are just few seconds left.
No problem, sir. Time is yours.
Assalamu alaikum, DG Shah.
Oh, sir, assalamu alaikum. MashaAllah.
Everybody else, I see
Another
renowned professors, 1, 2, 3 over here. Hello, everybody.
Alaikum.
Alaikum.
It should be an interesting webinar.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to the webinar organized by Bangladesh Institute of Maritime Research and Development, BIMRAD. Today's theme is emerging security challenges in the Indian Ocean region, assessing the impacts of geopolitical and geo-economic maneuverings in the Bay of Bengal littorals. Now, we have organized this particular webinar at a very crucial time. As I was listening to the different participants speak before the program started, again, geopolitics seems to be the buzzword, really, and of course, BIMRAD's attempt to talk about it has come at an extremely important time. So what we'll do today is we have one keynote speaker who will speak, and then we have a panel discussion to esteemed practitioners and academicians will talk about this particular matter. Before that, let me just say a few words, and then I will initiate the proceedings. Let me just remind the audience about a particular Greek which always never seems to fascinate me, and that is, of course, thalata, which means the sea. Xenophon's Anabasis, which refers to a military expedition, a march up the coast, literally, or a march up the country, written in the first decades of the 4th century BC, records this cry of a Greek army upon seeing the Black Sea. It expressed their relief and exultation upon escaping near certain death. While we are much more fortunate than the 10,000 Greek soldiers, I often feel echoing this heartfelt cry every time I come to BIMRAD. The reason is very simple, because BIMRAD has been working ceaselessly in ensuring that we Bangladeshis get to see the Black Sea, or in our case, the Bay of Bengal. Now, today's webinar is designed to open our eyes to an important and, dare I say, elementary aspect of politics, that is the influence of the sea on geopolitics. It is no coincidence that so many great national enterprises of the past 2000 years were influenced by sea power, and that continues to be true today. The sea is one indeed, particularly as a geopolitical entity, and will continue to exert enormous influence on how global events unfold, whether it is high tension in the South China Sea, cocaine smuggling of the Caribbean, piracy of the coast of Africa, the opening up of the Arctic. And as I was listening to the participants speak, what is the importance of the Sea of Azov, Black Sea, the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus? Again, this seems to be making a comeback. And of course, we as Bangladeshis, often we hear about the importance of Bay of Bengal, and we see that how this whole region has been undergoing transformation, and suddenly Bay of Bengal, the Indian Ocean, is often in the news, particularly for geopolitical reasons. So some observers may not be interested in geopolitics of oceans, but they will haunt our policies and choices in this turbulent 21st century. The oceans will matter deeply to every aspect of human endeavor, ladies and gentlemen. We should remember this. The good news is that over the past 2000 years, well, 3000 to be exact, since humans have begun to explore the world's oceans, we have learned a great deal. But despite this great learning, and the fact that we're incredibly, there are vast dimensions of oceans and seas that remains much we do not know. So in a certain sense, we have incredible knowledge of oceans, but little wisdom about them. And again, I want to emphasize this, ladies and gentlemen, that we have incredible knowledge about the oceans, but little wisdom about them. I hope that, and I'm sure that today's speakers will enlighten us with their wisdom about the Bay of Bengal, about geopolitics, and where we stand as far as the Bay of Bengal geopolitics and world politics is concerned. So without further ado, I would like to request the Honorable Director General of BIMRAD, Captain Minarul Haq, BCGM PSC, Bangladesh Navy, to give his welcome address, and we'll take it from there. So thank you. DJ, sir, it's yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Prominent keynote speaker, eminent panelist, moderator, proficient academicians and researchers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. It is a matter of privilege for me to welcome you all in today's webinar session on the theme Emerging Security Challenges in Indian Ocean Region, assessing the impacts of geopolitical and geoeconomics maneuverings in the Bay of Bengal littorals, organized by BIMRAD. I'm confident that this timely effort will bring a positive outcome and identify the challenges that need to be addressed immediately in this sector. Distinguished guests, at the outset, I humbly pay my deepest tribute to the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He prudently understood the importance of sea for the development of a maritime country like ours. The promulgation of the Territorial Waters and Maritime Zone Act 1974 was a testimony of Bangabandhu's leadership and vision. Again, under the dynamic leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh has obtained her rightful share in the Bay of Bengal by peacefully resolving maritime boundary disputes with their neighbors. This heralded new opportunities for Bangladesh for optimum utilization of sea resources for sustainable development of the country. It may be mentioned that the Territorial Waters and Maritime Zones Amendment Act 2021 has been promulgated on 7 December 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bay of Bengal provides a key maritime trade route signifying some strategically important choke points. The Bay connects East Asia's dynamic economies with the traditional markets of Europe via the oil-rich Gulf and rapidly growing Africa. Therefore, the Bay of Bengal is a strategic focal point for India, China, Japan, ASEAN countries, and other littoral states. The Bay of Bengal is rightly considered as the lifeline for the Bangladesh, as it provides her only access point to the sea. Bangladesh is rich in marine biodiversity and resources. It has also a huge potential of meeting Bangladesh's growing energy demand by providing energy resources. Proficient scholars and practitioners, a peaceful, free, and open Bay of Bengal is beneficial to all the littoral states, including Bangladesh. Hence, Bangladesh has stretched its principle of foreign policy, friendship to all and malice towards none, in dictating its diplomacy, said by the visionary leader Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. As a maritime nation, Bangladesh booming economic growth is largely dependent on the sea. Therefore, Bangladesh is a strong advocate of coexistence among the littoral states in the Bay of Bengal. Ladies and gentlemen, I strongly believe that BIMRAD will extend its research activities and provide support to the relevant stakeholders to identify the challenges in regards to the changing geopolitical and geo-economic dynamics of the Indian Ocean region. The reason, especially, the Bay of Bengal has been a geostrategically significant maritime space where the challenges from traditional and non-traditional security threats are getting complicated. Bangladesh, as the current chair of Indian Ocean Rim Association, has an immense potential to play a key role in promoting a stable maritime sphere in this region. The world has experiencing a volatile situation around the globe where a stable peace and order are at stake. The world is divided in many political blocs. So cooperation and understanding among the neighboring countries is crucial to the peace and stability of the region. Hence, this sort of platform can provide useful policy insights and produce meaningful policy recommendations. I'm confident that today's session hosted by BIMRAD would play a significant role in developing some guidelines for further research works, strategies, and principles in this field. I look forward to all concerned organizations, researchers, intellectuals, and maritime communities for their extended cooperation, support, and initiative for making this institution a center of excellence for the maritime community of Bangladesh. Eminent fellows, before I conclude, I would like to convey my heartfelt thanks to keynote speaker, panelists, and moderator for being present here despite their busy schedule. I also sincerely acknowledge the gracious presence of all distinguished guests and scholars. Finally, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to the Chief of the Naval Staff for his wholehearted support and active assistance in organizing this webinar and contributing towards sustainable development of maritime Bangladesh. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all.
Thank you, Captain Minan. We now start the day's proceedings. We have the keynote presentation. The title of the presentation is The Emergence of the Indian Ocean as the Center of Global Competition, the Implications for Geopolitical Dynamics of the Bay of Bengal. And speaking on this very important topic will be Professor Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed. A few brief words about Professor Imtiaz, even though he's an extremely well-known speaker, and most of us here, we know him very well. Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed is a professor of international relations and director Center for Genocide Studies at the University of Dhaka. He's also currently a visiting professor at Sagesi University, Beirut. Professor Ahmed is the recipient of numerous awards and honors. He was educated at Dhaka, Australia, and Canada. He has published more than 120 research papers, authored, co-authored or edited 26 books and 8 monographs. His recent publications are the following edited books: Ensuring Life Without Terror, Responses to Terrorism in Bangladesh, Dhaka University Press Limited, 2022, Genocide and Mass Violence, Politics of Singularity, Dhaka Center for Genocide Studies, University of Dhaka, 2019, The Rohingya Refugee Crisis Towards Sustainable Solutions, Dhaka Center for Genocide Studies, Hafiz University of Dhaka, Brack University Center for Peace and Justice, Action Aid 2019. So I now request Professor Imtiaz to speak on the emergence of Indian Ocean as the center of global competition. And sir, you have 25 minutes to make your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. Thanks to Captain Minar, the Director General of BIMRAD. What I will do, I will run through 25 slides, and hopefully we'll get some sense. And of course, I have extraordinary co-panelists with me today, so I don't have to worry if I miss. And of course, the moderator also is, one of the known personalities on Indian Ocean. So I am in good company today. So let me start, and this is something I always, the theoretical context is very important, and that is humans, we create geopolitics. Geopolitics does not create humans. It can only influence and discipline humans, albeit momentarily. And this is important because you will see that Indian Ocean earlier at time, and I think a moderator has already flagged that how important it was in ancient and medieval period, but then it really lost its kind of magic that it had, and but then it has now become literally a center of attraction. And this brings me to Nazim Hikmat's famous poem, "Brother, just wait, as long as I've got honey in my pot, bees will come to it from Timbuktu." It's good to remember this particular line because you all run after honey. And so the reason why Indian Ocean is where it is now is mainly because the honey is getting reproduced, and we'll see the problems arising out of that. This is what Indian Ocean is all about. Those who are not familiar, 3 continents. Well, one can include 4 continents if you want to bring Antarctica, but of course, Australia, Asia, and Africa. So you can see, if you look at all the, the countries around Indian Ocean, it's huge. In terms of economic importance, the middle slide is a little bit dated, 2017, but I thought this is going to help in any way. 11 to 12% of GDP, 35% of global population. It hosts 23 of world's top 100 ports. It's now 14% of world trade. And then if you look at all those percentage in terms of whether there's a fish capture and other the iron production, all you can easily see how important the region is. And look at the slide on the left. You can see how the share of world trade of Indian Ocean has increased from 8.7% to 15 points. Well, it is figured to be is going to go up as 16% in next 2-3 years. And in terms of intra-regional, this is also very interesting because currently we have 58% of Asia's trade is inter-regional. And there is one researcher who pointed out the more inter-regional Asia gets, more the inter-regional trade, particularly with Europe and North America, is going down. And that is also very significant because if you look at the demographic, you can easily see it has a market potential which is almost limitless, I would say. If you bring China and India, that itself is good enough to show how much it can be in the future, and we'll come back to that. In terms of strategic importance, the map will try to show you there are some choking points. They say out of 6 or 7 choking points. 4 are in Indian Ocean. Well, 3 are very important. The Strait of Hormuz, right at the top. Then, of course, Bab el-Mandeb, and then don't forget the Strait of Malacca. So you have 3 choking points in the Indian Ocean. And, when we talk about Bay of Bengal, you can't, you have to talk about Indian Ocean anyway. You can't talk of Bay of Bengal minus Indian Ocean. So in that way, if you look at the choking points, in one way or other, you can have a limited understanding of Bay of Bengal and trade a little bit here and there, but the choking points are equally important. Now, let's look back. A little bit of history, I think, is important. And I guess Marx would be very relevant here, particularly his statement where he says, and let me quote Marx here, men and women make their own history, but they do not make it just as they please. They do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves, but under circumstances directly encountered, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all the dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brain of the living, unquote. Now, this has come to be, even from the standpoint of psychology, those who are into experimental psychology, particularly Carl Gustav Jung, this statement has become so real. We carry actually the fear and the love of our parents and grandparents, and and it goes for centuries. And the reason why I'm flagging this particular understanding of history. Well, early 18th century, very vibrant Indian Ocean. You can see trading in all directions, and this is where Nazim Hikmat becomes important, because the bees started coming to Asia and not the other way around. And so you had the colonial powers, the Portuguese, the Spanish, of course, the French, and the British. And
Sir, we can't hear you, sir. Sir. স্যার আপনি কি শুনতে পাচ্ছেন আমাদেরকে?
Let me call, sir.
হ্যাঁ স্যার,
Phone দিচ্ছি না, sir. We can't hear you.
you can't hear us.
No.
না
no.
স্যার, আপনাকে শোনা যাচ্ছে না।
Let me.
You have disappeared, sir. Okay.
I think something to do with that. I'm delinking.
Okay. Ji. Rashid sir is connecting again, reconnecting himself.
Ladies and gentlemen, please bear with us as Professor Imtiaz Ahmed tries to get back on the internet. So thank you for your patience.
I got delayed. Yeah, I got delayed.
Sir,
Let me come back.
sir, thank you, sir.
This is, okay, let me come back to my, can you see the slide?
Yes, sir, we can, sir.
And did I finish this Marx part?
Yes, sir, you did finish.
Okay.
You were talking about the trade routes.
Oh, lovely. Okay, fine. So, the history is required to understand that in the 18th century, you had a very vibrant, trade, and this is where Nazim Hikmat becomes important, because in the 18th century, don't forget, China was the largest economy in the world, and in 18th century, undivided India was the second largest economy in the world, and in that undivided India, Bengal was the richest province, and that is precisely the reason why the British arrived in Bengal. And so we have an ocean syndrome, actually, the fear of the ocean, because the colonial powers, whether the Portuguese and the Spanish, the French, and of course the British, they all came via the ocean. And from that standpoint,
different speaker different speaker
we still have that fear of the ocean. Now, looking back into history a little bit, colonialism also can I be আমাকে দেখা যাচ্ছে তো না সবকিছু? Hello?
Sir, yes, sir.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Clear, sir.
Somebody was talking, so I thought, okay. Anyway, so colonialism led to the underdevelopment of Bengal. Don't forget, Dhaka was a very prominent city in the 18th century. In fact, one of the largest cities in the world during that time. And the honey was very much there in Bengal. As I said, it was the richest province in undivided India. And what we have with colonialism is the underdevelopment of Bengal. So we have a tragic history of Bengal from the richest province in the 18th century to the famine of 1943. And you can see Churchill's man-made famine, which killed 3.5 to 5 million people. And all the racist remarks of Churchill is well documented now. And read Shashi Tharoor. I think that would be good enough for those who don't want to go into details. I think Shashi Tharoor captures what colonialism did to undivided India, particularly Bengal. He has referred to Bengal, so many times, and to the city of Dhaka and to the Muslim, etc. And if I want to quote him, Britain came to one of the richest countries in the world and reduced it after 200 years of plunder to one of the poorest, unquote. So from around 20-21% to 2%. That's what colonialism did. So you can easily see why we have the fear of the ocean, or fear of external powers coming via the ocean. Now, decolonization contributed immensely to many of the things that we now see. If you look at the this particular image on the left, where in 19th century, the idea was that you go to the colonies to seek your fortune, but by mid-20th century, it turned upside down. You go to the colonial countries to seek fortune, which still remains today. Even some of my good students and my good friends, they're all they left Bangladesh, and somehow they migrated to all the developed countries. And the problem is not only the brain drain, which can be questioned, but there's also an asset drain. A lot of asset. So more corruption that we have in Bangladesh, the developed countries benefit from that corruption. So with decolonization, what emerged, I think, is globalization, where the rate of profit in the developed countries, in the developed capitalist countries, started falling. And the way they could reproduce their capitalist economy is by exporting their industries for the first time. Keep in mind, internationalization of the economy was always there. East India Company was there way back, but we are not talking about East India Company. Globalization is a totally different, what you call, domain when it comes to capitalism. For the first time in the history of capitalism, which even Marx or Lenin or Rosa Luxemburg or John Stuart Mill, Adam Smith, and I can go on and on, never thought that it could happen, and that is production became international. Production was never international. It was always part of national economy. And this is what Adam Smith is all about, Science of Wealth, or John Stuart Mill, and of course, Marx and others following that trend. But we are in an age where production has become international, in the sense that any product is not produced in one particular country, several other countries, and then it gets assembled in some place, and then it gets exported. Ready-made garments of Bangladesh is a good case. We are number 2 in the world after China when it comes to ready-made garments. And I'm sure you're familiar that the bulk of the cotton comes from, well, Central Asia and Africa now, increasingly. Almost 15% comes from India. Machinery used to come from Germany, now China. The fashion designs, they come from Milan or New York or somewhere else, and then it gets assembled here in Bangladesh. So you can, take some pride that it's made in Bangladesh, but it's made in several other countries. But that's not only with ready-made garments. The same thing is with Toyota car, IBM computer, iPhone. They're all made in several countries and assembled in some countries. That's what globalization is about. There's a win-win situation, and you can see with that win-win situation, we have re-rise of Asia. Japan was early on, and then you have the Vietnam, you have India, you have China, and of course we have Bangladesh. And to show Bangladesh is benefiting from globalization, I think this is the best slide you can find in the internet, where 1971, look at 71 and look at 2021. What a the kind of development one would be, back in 70s, no one would have thought. And I say this because I say a lot of my friends, some of even freedom fighters who lost patience and left the country because it was international basket case, that was the line. But now it has become a kind of a model in South Asia and for many developing countries. All the categories that you see, and it's not only in the GDP. Some people say, okay, GDP, but you bring PPP, you bring all economic categories, but it's not the economic categories. And this is where Amartya Sen becomes very important. He flagged the Human Development Index of Bangladesh long back. It's only the economists now reread Amartya Sen and talk about Bangladesh's miracle or Bangladesh's hybrid development, but read some of the works of Amartya Sen. He was flagging of the Human Development Index long back. Now, when you have re-rise of Asia, this is where you have the geopolitical competitions come in. Of course, you can see you need to contain China or contain Belt and Road Initiative. You have the Indo-Pacific Alliance, you have the Quad, and you also have the Build Better Partnership. And I guess in whatever way, even if you look at the number of military bases in Asia of some of the developed countries, you can easily see that they still feel insecure as to the rise or re-rise of China. So there is a renewed geopolitical competitions in the Indian Ocean, in Asia altogether. COVID-19, I can't help talking about COVID-19 because COVID-19 pandemic somehow showed some limits of cooperation when it comes to the Quad and some of the the developed countries getting together. Vaccine nationalism is one which made it very clear that no one wants to get out profited, and the competition, vaccine nationalism is still on. And somehow I think a lot of countries suffered because of this vaccine nationalism. And with that, of course, came the intra-Quad misgivings. I think the idea of the Quad when Japan floated was more to contain China economically, but not militarily. I think India also had the same sense, but somehow United States and Australia, they had other understanding of what Quad is. If you're familiar with the politics of AstraZeneca, I don't want to go into details, you can come back. We'll tell you why India has lost some of the some of the interesting developments that it had with the United States, particularly Donald Trump time. It started losing that relationship, and AstraZeneca could be one example. Now, when it comes to these two geopolitical competitions, BRI and Build Better Partnership, I still maintain that they are not, they're not commensurable. So the strategies are incommensurable, and for that reason, we still don't see a kind of security-led or military-led conflict, because BRI is a traditional infrastructure investment, ports, highways, airport, dams, whereas the other one led by the United States, is non-traditional infrastructure investment with climate, health, digital technology, and you can bring one for the other, because if you have BRI development, yes, you can talk about on the issue of climate and other things, but the two strategies are, I would consider, still incommensurable. If you look more at home with the China-India conflict, which is very interesting, they had a conflict in June 2020 with nail-started rods. That's the interesting part. Not a single shot was fired. The 14 soldiers that died on the Indian side, we really don't know how many died on the Chinese side, but none of them from, at least the Indian soldiers who died, none of them from firearms. And this goes back to 1996 agreement between China and India that in their border, I guess 2 kilometers on both sides, they will not carry firearms, and that they still abide by that, which is quite interesting how Asian countries try to somehow resolve some of their of the conflicts. It almost tells you something that Muhammad Ali, the boxer, said way back, that he will do very good if there's a third world war, fourth world war, because the third world war will kill everyone. Fourth world war, the boxing would be the one. But I guess Galwan Valley proved that Muhammad Ali is early on, in fact, and they literally fought each other with nail-studded rods. Now, in the Asia, we had a departure of United States, of a developed Western country, since NATO was also involved in Afghanistan, and with the return of the Taliban, one can see that we now have different Asian geopolitics altogether. The defeat of the United States in Afghanistan also signals that you are going to have a different Asia altogether. And my next slide will try to show that the reconstruction of an Asian landlocked country, the Afghan economy, where you have now Iran, China, Russia, who thought 10 or 20 years back that you are going to see an image of this kind. But then it doesn't stop, because the geopolitics of military industrial complex is still an issue. And this is where my argument is what we are witnessing is a transformation from Quad to Triad, since the United States could not, in fact, push India to the extent that it want, particularly in the security issues. I guess United States also gave up and settled for US, UK, Australia, Triad, and with the nuclear submarines and all, you can easily see here again, we have a military industrial complex coming up and helping them to do what they have been doing for quite some time, or since the end of Second World War, or even early on, people would say. But that's the transformation that we see. Can they change things? Because the other geopolitical dynamics we see is the changing international economic order. And here is a focus of 2050. And the 2050 focus clearly shows in terms of economy. And this is where tension has been built, whether the developed capitalist country can contain the capi communism of China, which is a huge economic potential. India, third becomes the United States. Then also, you will see Indonesia coming up, and a lot of other countries. And some of the permanent members, if you look at France and UK, just imagine where they would be. And so there will be questions as to that even at the economic level, they would be relatively insignificant. So we are heading towards what I would say Pax Multipolaritica. A lot of countries may not be favorable to it, particularly if you are a superpower, or if you are aspiring superpower, you may look at this to be more chaotic, but I don't think one can help. The globalization has led to a situation where humans' aspirations cannot be cornered and cannot be limited to areas. Earlier with colonialism, you really didn't know what was happening in some of the countries in the world, but now it's an impossibility. So multipolarity. I have 2 or 3 slides and then I'll stop. Are we heading for a new Cold War? Could be. And this is an interesting slide I found in the internet, where the peacock stands for India. You can see the balance. I guess one could have put the Royal Bengal of Tiger there also. Bangladesh is also, on the tight rope. You can easily see the recent voting that took place in the General Assembly on the Ukraine issue. And as you have seen, some of the countries have abstained, and quite interestingly, and probably for the first time, you had India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh together. This is India and Bangladesh probably were together in other, but very difficult to say with Pakistan, India, all abstaining, and for different reasons. I will argue for different reasons. Interestingly, Myanmar actually voted in favor of the resolution. If they had abstained, everybody would have said, "Oh, Myanmar is under China. They listen to China. China is the factor," because that is what we listen when we talk about Rohingya issue. But Myanmar has showed that's not true, and we have been saying that for quite some time, that that's not true. I guess the West could take lessons from there, and the rest of the world could take lessons from that, particularly Myanmar's voting in favor of the resolution. So what we have, we come back to the Blue Hub, and this is where I think the Bay of Bengal need to focus more, how we can trade among ourselves, enrich each other, not get into conflict. And already Captain Minar has the DG of BIMRAD has flagged the friendship towards the Malays towards none. A fascinating principle, I always say, which was established before the birth of Bangladesh, when we were part of Pakistan. It came out of Awami League's election manifesto, and not after 1971. A lot of people think it was after 1971. Even then, Awami League, under the leadership of Bangabandhu, pointed out that if they come to power, they will not be part of CENTO and SEATO. And you can easily see why United States was angry. So what we have with in the Blue have something that Bangladesh can flag regionally and globally is this development without enmity. We literally don't have any enemies, literally. As I speak, Myanmar tried its hard, it's still trying with the Rohingya issue, but still we maintain all kinds of relationship with Myanmar. So development without enmity, I think Ukraine can also take lessons from Bangladesh. That would be interesting to see, because you can change your friends, you can change your enemies, but you can't change your neighbors. So since Russia and Ukraine, they have to live as neighbors, I guess friendship towards all, Malays towards none could be one way of resolving the crisis in Ukraine now. So development without enmity would be one which I would flag if Bangladesh and some other countries really want to look and empower each and every person that we have. It's billion plus, you can well imagine. The potential is huge, is unthinkable potential. The intra-trade is unimaginable, where is, as I say, the sky is the limit. It's absolutely limitless. So I have hope that this rise of Asia will also have impact globally. Europe will also see why Asia as a civilization is very important. Keep in mind, when Gandhi was asked about what do you think about Western civilization, he said, "I think it is a good idea." So, even at that point when we were under colonial power, Gandhi had the pride to focus on the civilization that brought him to say something of that kind. So let's work to make a difference. I still think that humans would make a difference in the future. Let me stop here. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for an enlightening presentation. As I said at the very beginning, that we know a lot about the oceans, but the wisdom often seems to elude us, and I'm sure that you have emphasized on that. Two things are very, very important. I think as I I was listening to Professor Imtiaz speak. His emphasis on the importance of the Indian Ocean. This is something which we really need to remember, and I hope to talk. I'm sure that the other participants will talk more about this over the next few hours, half an hour or so. Another important issue, which again Dr. Imtiaz highlighted, is that unlike the Atlantic and particularly the Mediterranean, and of course also the Pacific, the Indian Ocean has been an ocean where we have seen less war, but more trade. So in other words, the importance of trade is something which throughout history, I mean, if you look at the Roman records, if you look at the Persian records, if you look at the ancient Harappan civilization, trade was something which was an integral part of the Indian Ocean. And I think this is something which again came up during today's discussion. And I'm sure that we'll be talking more about this as we listen to the other panelists. So it is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Enam Shahab Khan to speak on the growing significance of the Bay of Bengal in the global maritime space, strategic and geo-economic implications for Bangladesh. Again, I'm sure that most of us, we know Dr. Enam Shahab Khan, a very familiar face as far as the electronic media is concerned. Dr. Enam Shahab Khan is a professor of international relations at Jahangirnagar University. He has worked as a senior level consultant and advisor for many national, multilateral, and international organizations. He drafted the National Broadcasting Policy 2014, provided support to the government agencies and the United Nations agencies during the Rohingya crisis, and has been a member of multiple Bangladesh-Myanmar dialogues and refugee repatriation. His expertise focuses on foreign affairs, defense and security, that is terrorism, extremism, migration, particularly in the Bay of Bengal region, Rohingya and Northeast India, and energy. Dr. Shahab regularly delivers talk and lectures at Armed Forces War Course and the National Defense College Bangladesh and various international events. He has been appointed as the editor-in-chief of the National Defense College Journal, the first civilian to hold the post. Professor Shahab Khan is currently an academic advisor to the National Defense College, the premier armed forces institution. So, Dr. Shahab, if I may request you to start your presentation, please note that you have 15 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It's certainly a pleasure and definitely an honor for myself to be present in this particular event, which I believe has an extreme importance for Bangladesh at the moment. As Imtiaz sir has mentioned, that we have to have our balancing act right and perhaps have a relationship that is built on the spirit of friendship and definitely not in the spirit of any kind of animosity. And sir has highlighted one of our critical partner, whether in the context of Bay of Bengal, Myanmar. Still, we have a very functional relationship, which is quite admirable. On the other hand, we have another critical partner, which is India, and perhaps we still maintain a very cooperative relationship. And the classic case that we have established across the world is our peaceful demarcation of borders and boundaries, maritime boundaries with these two countries. And I think this has become one of the fundamental benchmark in international politics and international law, in which Bangladesh presents itself as one of the unique countries in the world, which has never been resorting into any kind of border conflict or tensions with any countries in the region and beyond the region. And perhaps the phenomenal aspect of Bangladesh foreign policy, Bangladesh's security policy, and perhaps Bangladesh's defense strategies is essentially to remain helpful to others rather than being offensive. And the classic case is we have never resorted into any kind of conflicts with any of the neighbors in and around the country. Now, that gives us a great pleasure in complementing our growth trajectory. And I will be linking the growth trajectory later on when it comes to the Bay of Bengal. If you look at Bangladesh's growth trajectory at the moment, it is probably the most stable economy with a rising capacity as a economic power in the region. And perhaps this is where my talk starts with, by saying that since we're in the trajectory, right trajectory in terms of our economic power, and perhaps we have a lot to offer to the international community, as well as gain from the international community. Even when we looked into these particular topics title, and it says that the growing significance of the Bay of Bengal in the global maritime space. Even when we talk at the moment, the whole idea of maritime space is changing. If you look at the International Seabed Authority, as for the first time issued 15 years contract for 21 contractors to exploit the resources in Clarion Clipperton zone to India, to mid-Atlantic, to South Atlantic and Pacific. New technologies are coming, new factors are coming, new norms and priorities are coming, and of course, new code of conduct and businesses are coming up. So then again, the way we traditionally used to think about maritime space will essentially be changing over the coming period of time. And that's where our preparation needs to be focused on. And even if you look at the Ukraine crisis, which Professor Rashiduzzaman has mentioned earlier, the politics of the Sea of Azov or perhaps Black Sea Bosphorus is coming back. And that also tells you a very grim picture of resource nationalism. And perhaps that tells you that the energy politics is not going to go away. This necessity to secure strategic line of communication is not going to go away anytime soon. Rather, the competition over these issues will continue to bolster, which means we are now at the moment when we have to rethink our own domestic resources, including that available in the Bay of Bengal. And that has to be done in an ethical and fair manner. So that we can perhaps leave the benefits of the Bay of Bengal, not only for the current state of economic affairs, but also for the future generations to come. I'm often skeptic, although Professor Imtiaz has always taught us that you can change your friends but neighbors. But again, sir, if you look at Europe and South China Sea, they themselves are contradicting with this whole dictum. And perhaps that gives us some sort of eerie understanding that what will happen, not only Bangladesh. I mean, I consider Bangladesh as a very strong, large country, not a small country, but definitely there are smaller countries who might be thinking at the moment whether, given the failures in the multilateral institutions and the repeated violation of sovereignty, can essentially make them much more pushed towards certain polarization. And I think we have done fairly fantastic in that particular genre of politics that is unfolding. And that's exactly where, again, understanding the Bay of Bengal is needed beyond the understanding of economics. And perhaps, I mean, even both the moderator and the keynote speakers happen to have been my course tutors, and I'm grateful to them. And perhaps what we are now seeing that there is a blurring space between geostrategic and geopolitics when it comes to Bangladesh, and perhaps geoeconomics and geostrategic for Bangladesh, because for us, when we mean defense is being defensive about the national resources, which does not necessarily have to be complementing with the Indo-Pacific or perhaps BRI. But certainly there are convergences, as Professor Imtiaz has rightly mentioned, that one hand, the BRI comes with port and infrastructure and everything. On the other hand, you see that Indo-Pacific has digital infrastructure and so on. And for Bangladesh, convergence lies there. And in future, how we are going to play on this convergence will essentially determine how we will be looking forward to that particular. Even if you look at that in many cases, the whole idea about the geopolitical hotspots in international politics and in relations, we can't really disconnect ourselves with two other phenomena that is unfolding hand in hand. Of course, I would go a little beyond the conventional discourses, which I leave it with Professor Imtiaz has given the absolute layout for. Just to add to that particular discussion or discourse is the artificial intelligence. And that's where the whole problem lies. The surveillance pattern has changed. defense mechanisms are changing, and the question is whether we will be cooperating, or perhaps complementing, or perhaps have developed our future resources, whether in a technological domain, or perhaps having a technological understanding will be something that we have to look into. Of course, my neighbor India has already undertaken a $1.1 billion sea exploration programs to explore the potentials of ocean energy and seabed mineral resources. Similar activities are definitely going on in the South China Sea, and of course, now through that ISA-approved contractors. Now, the question remains that how fast, at least given the Ukrainian crisis at the moment, and the volatility in the energy market, and and a barrel of oil at the moment is $138. And perhaps we have to look forward to this exploration as soon as possible, and that's exactly where we will have our own strategic advantages. And again, when I mean a strategic advantage, is essentially the economy that we're cherishing at the moment. Now, that's where the whole problematic lies too, which requires a very careful, all-encompassing planning and strategies, which definitely would require legal standards, human resources, behavioral and technological aspects. And I think this is a new time where we should be rethinking about not only our naval doctrine, but also about our maritime doctrine in the coming years. One should not forget that the sustainability of ecosystems, and if you look at the unregulated movement of trawlers, boats, and these are becoming problematic not only for Bangladesh, but also for the regional countries. And I think this is exactly where Professor Imtiaz Ahmed Sir has rightly mentioned that we need to look into our existing institutions rather than reinventing new institutions, and how we can make BIMSTEC to come and play a fundamental role in these particular problems that is directly linked with a fisheries resources, pollution, and whatnot. And that's exactly, I think, Sir has highlighted that we need to really look into our institutions very much. And ASEAN, if you look at that, world's 25% world's fish is produced by ASEAN. Myanmar's, which is an ASEAN and BIMSTEC nation, fishing remains unaccountable to a great extent. And certainly illegal fishing without reporting violence, certainly the Article 145 of the UN Convention on the Law. But saying that, this is a phenomena not only specific to one particular state, but also this is a phenomena that we get to see across the sea. And that's exactly, I think, we need to have a common understanding, and BIMRAD can perhaps become one of the key agents for this particular change that we need to bring in. And definitely, if you look at 2 lakhs tons of plastic pollution and plastics entered the Bay of Bengal. And that's where, again, the new understanding of the Bay comes in. And I think Sir has also highlighted that, and perhaps Captain Minard, the Director General of BIMRAD, has also made a passing remark of that. And that means technically Bangladesh is becoming one of the top 20 most plastic polluting countries in the world. And that also calls for us to really look into the internal mechanism which needs to be governed with absolute transparency and accountability to make sure that we keep our part of the water clean. And population pressure is there, poor waste management is there, shipbreaking sometimes is unregulated, and then definitely these all have eventual implication on the Bay too. Now, even if you come up from the economic perspective, and even if you look at the very critical understanding of burden sharing is something that is often missing. And Professor Imtiaz Sir was absolutely right when the whole idea of how we see the sea in the Pacific and BRI, and that's where I think the whole genesis of burden sharing comes in. We will need to remove the very myopic mindset of seeing the Bay from as a strategic defensive or offensive sea mass, and perhaps that's something makes us quite difficult in maneuvering through the geostrategic interest of the global powers. But so far Bangladesh has done commendably right in that particular phenomena. And even if we want to govern our maritime space, one thing we should not forget, that we need to have a proper exchange of information, pollution data, and build infrastructure for certainly to deal with the pollution. That we cannot do ourselves alone, because the water also comes from the upper riparian countries too. So that's where I think the greater cooperation is very much needed, and I believe that will eventually be one of the critical factors in determining how we govern our particular water resources. Now, even look at the whole idea of the dead zone, and I'm quite sure our senior naval practitioners would know it much better, that the dead zones are appearing quite often, and not only from the sulfur oxidizing bacteria or marine worms. There are creatures that can also be problematic for us, and that's where I think we will have to be channelizing our resources, because we also would need in future to make sure that our population remains productive, have adequate calories, which is essential for our making the economy much more productive and go ahead. And that's where the key nutrient factor, which is now being debated in the economic sphere, the nutrition and malnutrition stuffs. And this can be one of the potential sources for us to look into. Now, again, with all these notes, and obviously, as Sir highlighted about the BIMSTEC, we should not also be oblivious of the fact that BIMSTEC offers a gross domestic product of $3.5 trillion, which means we are also a part of a huge economic bloc that has to be channelized through multilateralism and through effective communication and engagement, in which I believe the term the defense diplomacy or military diplomacy comes in, when the navies meet each other, where the conventional diplomacy comes in, where the traditional diplomacy engages at the state affair. And obviously there has to be a greater civil society participation in this particular discourse. And that's where I believe we have a very fundamental feature of Bangladesh's foreign policy and Bangladesh's naval policies are linked with. And with the last comment that I believe is very important, for us to really channelize more research into this particular issue. More dialogues, more naval dialogues, more intra-regional dialogues. Sir has highlighted about ASEAN. ASEAN has intra-regional trade, which is almost 25% of their economy. And in South Asia, it's less than 5%. That tells you this current state of cooperation to a great extent too. So I think given Bangladesh's growth trajectory and Bangladesh's relationship with the international political actor, this is very important that we articulate our particular policies for the next 10 years to 20 years to 30 years. And that's where I think our own grand strategy should come in. Ceteris paribus, if the economy continues to grow at a fantastic level that we have, the way the global interest in Bay of Bengal comes in concerning Myanmar, China, and beyond, and on the other hand, India, Pakistan, and beyond. And I think we are ideally situated in that particular landmass. I would strongly suggest that we should start working on creating our own human resources that would be able to negotiate, maneuver through today's topic, as the Director General has rightly endorsed, today's maneuvering capacities, and perhaps through that maneuvering capacities to come to a desired end, which is absolutely related to Bangladesh's national interest and Bangladesh's national interest. And I think there's no disagreement in understanding that the maritime space that we have should be considered as the prime national interest for the country and 170 million people, which will require very efficient human resources and policy designs. And I think this is where our maneuverability will certainly be playing or dwindling upon. And as a result, the strategic and geoeconomics implications that we have talked about, and I had the privilege, I would say, to work with Rear Admiral Anwar earlier at the Defense College, and we have talked about that how we should be rethinking about our defense, and where the Navy's role has become much more vital than ever. And that's where I think our whole understanding of the blurring space between geostrategy and geoeconomics from Bangladesh's point of view, I'm not taking the views of the other countries, would essentially be very fundamental for our success in future. With that note, I thank you very much for your patient hearing. And as always, I learn from my esteemed mentor, Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, and obviously Professor Rashiduzzaman. With that note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Inam Shahabka, for a brilliant presentation. You rightly pointed out the importance of having a strategic vision, and of course, the issues of environmental pollution, climate change, population movement, fishing. These are the things which have often come up, and I think this is also something which is very, very important when we talk about the Bay of Bengal, both from a strategic and from a geo-economic perspective. So right now, we now have our second panelist, who will be speaking on transcending barriers to maritime cooperation in the context of South Asia. And speaking on this very important topic will be Rear Admiral Muhammad Anwar Islam, NGP, NDC, AFWC, PSC retired. Professor Rear Admiral Anwar and I, we go a long way back. Again, like Dr. Shah pointed out, it has been my privilege to interact with him at various institutions, and I've always come out of our interaction more enlightened about naval affairs due to his long experience at sea. So just a few words about Rear Admiral Anwar, and then I'll request the speaker to talk on this important topic. So he joined the Bangladesh Navy as an officer cadet on 5th November 1979 and was commissioned in the executive branch on 5th May 1982. Rear Admiral Anwar has a distinguished career in command, staff, and instructional appointments. He has commanded a number of ships and establishments of Bangladesh Navy. He served as Commander BN Fleet, Commodore Superintendent Dockyard, Commodore Special Warfare, Diving and Salvage Command, and Commander Chittagong Naval Area. He also served as Chairman of Chittagong Port Authority. His staff served as Directing Staff in the Armed Forces, War Corps Wing of National Defense College, Bangladesh, and other training establishments of Bangladesh Navy. He also had the opportunity to serve as ADC to the Honorable President. For his outstanding contribution in the Navy, he has been awarded the No Gaurav Padak, NGP. Rear Admiral Muhammad Anwar Islam will speak on transcending barriers to maritime cooperation in the context of South Asia. So the floor is yours, and you have 15 minutes to speak on this important topic.
Thank you very much, sir. Respected chair, respected moderator, and the keynote speaker, and the co-panelists. Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon to all of you. It's always good to be the last speaker, so you can learn more from the previous speakers, and it is also very challenging because some of the things that has been that I thought of has already been covered. So what I do, I see this topic I will see this topic in a more practitioner's point of view, not much on a theoretical aspects, and I'll try to put some food for thoughts, and the thing that will overlap those slides, definitely I will try to skip through so that I can do things in time. Right, maritime cooperation and safety. So to defining maritime cooperation, which can be defined as the relationship between cross-border maritime local authorities regarding common activities that we carry out at sea. And when you talk of maritime security in particular, it pertains all issues that relate to the seas. It entails provisions of secure environment at and from the seas that fosters national growth. The flag is that fosters national growth. There's no doubt about it. Just to introduce the subject, the security of a nation state is not confined to traditional definitions alone. This is, of course, known to all. It encompasses a whole range of things now. And as Professor Imtiaz has rightly pointed out, Indian Ocean has emerged as a great commons for the whole world. Therefore, the development and security of silence of communications are absolutely interlinked. The maritime crime and crisis are becoming prevalent day by day, for which we require actually the prevention mechanism and cooperation. In case of the crisis caused by our mother nature, we need awareness. We all aware of it, prevention mechanism and cooperation. And in case of man-made crisis, where awareness, prevention, and law enforcement and cooperation, of course, are vital. However, the most important aspects is the mutual trust, respect, cooperation amongst the littorals is the best way to overcome such challenges, which was highlighted by both the speakers earlier. Now, why cooperation is so vital? Because in outer sea, it creates the safety of maritime links, which you call silence of communication, while combating non-traditional security threats that are emerging and continuously growing and evolving. We need to protect our maritime environment. We have to ensure economic development, tourism, cultural cooperation, etc. Renewable energies are coming in a big way nowadays. Integrated management of coastal areas now is a big buzzword that are coming in, and improvement and development of port, shipping, hinterland connectivity, and coastal urban areas. Those Professor Imtiaz has very strong, very seriously highlighted, and those also comes in a big way. And the last is definitely the maritime pollution. And there are many other aspects for which such cooperations are very vital. Now, maritime crime and crisis, its nature and multifaceted dimension is a fascinating subject, and there's no end to it. The non-traditional threats that are varied in nature and difficult to identify in the vast space of ocean and outer sea. They occur at unprecedented time. In other words, they are episodic and asymmetric in nature. The dimension of such threat is not classic, and the range vary from inshore waters to the high seas. The actors involved in non-traditional threats are sometimes non-state, sometimes even state actors nowadays, what we see. Many non-traditional threats in maritime security, or most of the non-traditional threats in maritime security, emerge from land, as criminals do not live at sea. So crises like sea level rise, plastic terrorism, which I will explain later, are the gift of the development 21st century. Those, of course, requires different approach. Now, this one is definitely Professor Imtiaz has highlighted. I just don't want to spend time on it, but it shows how important the Indian Ocean, the Bay of Bengal is. Now, the types of maritime crime and crisis, these are known to most of the naval officers, also the others, and I will quickly scan through just as a broad brush for reminder that what are the problems that we have now. The trafficking is a huge problem. Indian Ocean in general and the Bay of Bengal in particular are the center of this misdeed. The people are falling victims, especially the women and children, and the scourge strategy of Myanmar is the center of such undesirable business. And Rakhine State is the most affected. Now it is not the Rakhine State, from all over the Myanmar things are coming up. Again, on respect of trafficking, the human trafficking, as I mentioned earlier, for male and female are the victim of all ages. Now, Golden Crescent, we live unfortunately in a place where Golden Crescent and Golden Triangle is very close to us, and we are the unfortunate victim, Bangladesh. The human trafficking, drug trafficking, gun running, abduction, black money, and all, everything, all forms of, these are all linked with the terrorism, and they are all interlinked. One live with the other, one fuel the other, another one. The refugee and boat people from Myanmar has been and will continue to create regional crisis. And this is going to be ultimately, God knows where it's going to end up, maybe a global crisis. Now, what is happening in Myanmar, the insurgency and internal crisis, in Myanmar is going through is going to make things definitely worse, since all these groups require easy money and continue their armed struggle. And so many major actors and players are acting from outside and instigating. Now, if we see the porous, lawless border of Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and those places, they are the hub of heroin production. The Golden Triangle now, they have started producing more modern and more upgraded version of synthetic drugs. And we know that whatever these things are available, wraps are catching in our open market. And it's a billion and billions of dollars of trade. And unfortunately, most of the trade takes place through the sea route. The piracy is the oldest job out that mariners used to do from the ancient time out at sea, and still continue to concern us. Thanks God that piracy, along with the piracy and armed robbery, a new terminology, petty theft, has been inserted with the initiative of Bangladesh Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that has really reduced the insurance cost of Chittagong Harbor and many harbors in our area, because a small sampan wala cannot do a piracy in the outer anchorage of Chittagong. This slide shows the 2008 Mumbai attack. It has made a new dimension in the maritime arena. Of course, before that, there was an incident in Aden Harbor and many other places. Last year also, we have seen a different form of state-sponsored terrorism, which happened between Israel, Iran, and America, and many other countries that I will describe a little later. The marine pollution, definitely, Professor Imtiaz calls it plastic terrorism. I really go by it, because you cannot eat computers and chips. We have to drink waters, and bottled water is not a solution. And no human being or no living being cannot survive without waters. And we are in Bangladesh is bestowed with lots of waters and human resources, and unfortunately, we are not making the best use of it. IUU fishing, it has been discussed by Professor Shahid Anam, but unfortunately, in our region, in our waters, 33% of the global and 40% of regional IUU fishing in our Indian Ocean reef. So, which is quite a substantial amount. And Thai fishermen are the champion in this. Now, what are the limitations of UNCLOS in this aspect? We all talk about UNCLOS. UNCLOS is probably the best possible document that has ever been produced. But unfortunately, it has lots of limitations that we are facing now. Because unlike domestic crimes, it goes beyond the national international limits, therefore legally challenging to address. Because of the globalization, a ship belongs to a country registered in another country, just like the example Professor Imtiaz has given in respect of governments. But after we apprehend some of those criminals at high seas or in the coastal areas, they belong to many other countries and many other nationalities. The ship has got cargoes of many countries. Now, how to prosecute them, where to prosecute them, we need to think about it. And international authority or global authority yet to find a solution on this. In respect of national and international effort to combat maritime crime and crisis, some of the good examples we can see that China is stepping up with efforts with Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam in a joint operation. They had reasonably good success, except few places in Thailand, of course. We have seen the successful combating of Somali pirates, of course, with the big question that the negotiators and who are these pirates and who are the negotiators, that remains always a big question. The Singapore-based Fusion Center, to give a bigger picture of this, is doing a great job. So as the recap, but extra regional powers nowadays we also see in the form US, Japan, UK, France, Australia, and many other countries are stepping up their efforts in the Indian Ocean region, trying to poke their nose into Bay of Bengal as well. But sometimes we see them in a positive attitude also. Quad, as it was mentioned earlier, of course, in respect of Quad, my only comment will be that in respect of in case of HADR and disaster relief, okay, is there in good though, but it's not a NATO of Asia. There are so many conventions, so many rules and regulations, whether national, international, or bilaterals, on combating crimes out at sea, drugs, human trafficking, and so on and so forth. But question still remains the implementation and cooperation and coordination in this aspect. This is something that I want to spend about 3-4 minutes time, if I may. That is the game-changing oil and gas pipeline through Myanmar, the new Silk Road. Should we be concerned? Should we be concerned? I know that Proxy Imtiaz Center and everybody else is now really busy with the Rohingya refugee crisis and the International Tribunal and all other things. But I see this issue in a totally different perspective. Kaipu was long been a fishing vessel. You can see the picture on the left-hand side, and on the right side is that this is the plan they have approved. Of course, they are doing it gradually and slowly, but they have already started using this port and they have started delivering oil and gas. This is a very common picture known to all of us, that Myanmar, China is taking oil, gas from 2 gas fields very close to St. Martin Islands. And of course, the pipeline, oil pipeline is also there, but it has a lot of deeper meaning. This also slide shows that on the left-hand side, the oil and gas projects with the Chinese involvement out at sea, on the land also. And on the right-hand side slide, I'm sure you can see that some of the other major projects, only the major projects that Myanmar is particularly involved in it, and Kayapur, the special economic zone. Here, I want to mention one thing, that we all talk of that China's Malacca dilemma. So they are building this bypass to avoid Malacca, but nobody talks of that Japan and Korea, they are much more dependent on Malacca Strait than China, because China now going to get most of their hydrocarbons from Russia and by themselves. This is a slide I find it quite fascinating, where it links up the Gwadar of Pakistan. I did not intentionally put the Chabahar of Iran, and Hambantota in future. Of course, Hambantota, people talks of Sri Lankan depth trap, but they are going to probably make it a major logistic hub or logistic base. And the Kayapur Myanmar, Andaman. But the Kayapur Myanmar or the Sithui, these are just on the neck, we're so close to Indian coast. Andaman Nicobar. India is already stepping up their effort in Andaman Nicobar Island, in the central, in their joint command, and going for a major expansion. Now, think of that, the volume of traffic, the kind of shipping that is we expect to start coming in 5, 10, 15 years time in Kayapur, Myanmar, or that small strip of sea is a huge one. And those are super tankers, LNG carriers, and of course, a lot of export vessels. And the project that comes from Kunming to Kayapur, over there, they are building roads. They are going to bring down most of their labor-intensive industries down below, and most of their logistics hubs down below. That means huge amount of shipping will start coming in that small area. And please don't forget that Bangladesh also building up lots of port and shipping facilities out at Paira, Matarbari, Paira, our Chittagong Port Bay Terminal is coming up, and lots of mega projects, hinterland projects are coming up. That means in such a small strip of area on the southeastern part of Bay of Bengal, in next 5 to 10 years time, we can see some huge amount of maritime traffic. And that we must think about it. Why should we think about it? Because, you see, sir, RPG and IED that used to be used earlier by the LTT and all other terrorist groups are no more a major concern. Last year, in the end, we have seen how the surface-to-surface missiles and drones are being used to use the oil tankers of Israelis, Iranis, Houthi rebels, and whatnot. So these technologies are going from one place to everybody's hand, to rogue hands. Even the lone superpower USA is hijacking Iranian ships and selling in the selling in the open market, telling it's for humanitarian purpose. So actually, the events of Persian Gulf, Red Sea nowadays in a Black Sea, of course, it proves that how selfish the global regimes are. After the Afghan-Russian war, we have seen the lethal weapons causing regional instability. Now, after the departure of the US from Afghanistan, arming the Ukrainian by the West may have the similar consequences. Insurgency crisis in Myanmar, easy access to money, their lethal weapon will have to be taken into account. And we certainly do not want Chinese or any other ships of extra-regional power to come in our Bay of Bengal to ensure our sea lanes of communication, safe traffic, safety, and etc. So that's the point that I want to highlight here, give you some food for thought, something new. Now, both the non-traditional security threats and IPS issues confluence, for example, through hotspots like Myanmar, and there is a chance of complex security threat scenario in this area. In this context, the attack on Bangla Samriddhi at Maripur Anchorage is a potential case to study. During the fog of war or fog of any unsolved conflict, or even intentional or unintentional desire of someone, is a matter of study who actually attack the ship or may attack in future, or such incident may take place in future. Thus, regional and sub-regional states has to identify and explore common ground for maritime security cooperation among themselves. The flag I want to mention is among themselves. We have to resolve our own problem by talking to each other. As Professor Shahidanand said, that we don't discuss, do more dialogue. We need to do more dialogue amongst each other. Now, opportunities for collaboration and in collaborative initiative in the Bay of Bengal region. Of course, the mechanism of IORA, BIMSTEC, IONs are there in collaboration with ASEAN. We could bring a suitable option. Definitely, after lots of discussion, definitely things can be made better, because these are the common threats that we have, common issues we have. BIMSTEC continued to have an outlined legal framework to strengthen cooperation about the international terrorism, transnational organized crime, drug trafficking, including sea level rise, etc. It's a great initiative, but it has been so far a talk shop. I personally attended some of them. Lots of good, beautiful Englishly written articles and agendas are there, but how much actually has been done, that remains a question. IORA is started fantastic, very, very well, but still I believe it can work if it can work on common interest of the sea, and it has to be subdivided groups. It has to work on a subdivided groups. And particularly for IONs, where I was deeply involved, IONs can be made effective. Definitely it can be made effective with the navies and coast guards, but it has to be subdivided into sub-regional groups, and sub-regional groups has to take responsibility on the sub-regions on those issues, because those are the common grounds they will have to find. And definitely we don't want somebody to do big brother's attitude there. Respect for each other has to be there. Sir, I'm almost at the coming to the end. The concluding remarks I want to bring in is the challenges to maritime cooperation in South Asia, and particularly in the Bay of Bengal region, to ensure maritime security is multifaceted and complex, definitely complex. In such a small area, the last few slides I have shown that how complex it can become when so many types and kinds of ships will start moving in. And one or two such incidents, what nuisance it can create. Important to recognize ocean as a common security space and work out collective strategies for common purpose. That calls for Bangladesh in particular, as Professor Shahab has said, that we have to have our maritime strategy and naval strategy in line with our national security policy as quickly as possible and lay it out and develop ourselves or make up our mindset in that line. I think we're getting late. The cooperative intention of littoral states has always indicated to resolve, to engage peace with respect. There's no doubt in it, through dialogue and commitment to international law. There's no doubt in it. We always been sitting together, resolved our issues. We have resolved our maritime boundary relation issues. We have some of the issues, but that can be solved. While looking for a common ground, I believe search and rescue is doing a fantastic job. HADR is doing a good job, but particularly in respect of coastal shipping agreement could be a better option for all littorals of Bay of Bengal. One more example I want to give it here, that we have been importing fish from Myanmar, and these are the old Thai trawler that comes to take nav, and return when it goes by, it takes medicine and few other items. Now, every day earlier we used to see that about 15 to 20 ships is to come, that to bring in those fishes up to Dhaka, Narayanganj, and the other markets. Can you believe how many hundreds of trucks has to ply this big in the highways? Why not? These ships have a draft of about 3 to 4 meters. Why don't we allow these ships to come to Chittagong Harbor, Chittagong, Sodorghat, Narayanganj, and all other places? We can have the similar arrangements with Sri Lanka, with India. That's what is happening now, even with Malaysia and Indonesia, because we produce nowadays very high quality coastal ships with twin screw, twin radar, and these are seagoing ships. And Bangladesh on the river side, Bangladesh probably is one of the country exceptionally who can do this thing on the riverside fields at international standard. So why not we make the best use of it? Because it will give us a good win-win situation and a common ground to work. A comprehensive maritime domain awareness, which is actually missing in our governance level, probably over the entire region or over the sub-region, might facilitate substantial fund and technology. Now, the word fund, people always talk about it. I also kept it, but I personally believe that I think Bangladesh, India, and all these regional countries, we have reasonably good fund to do this kind of jobs on our own. Technology, of course, we can take from outside. And effective surveillance and enforcement and prevention mechanism definitely is required. If Singapore can create a fusion center, why not? We also should have something like that. Thus, at the end, the summary is, let's work together for mutual benefit. There's no alternative to it. And if need be, and certainly for the benefit of Bangladesh, for benefit of us, we have to take the lead, because it is going to ensure peace, progress, and prosperity of our nation. And we can also contribute in our regional peace and progress. Thank you very much, I think, sir. That's all from me. And it was short, precise, to the point. I try to keep it. Hopefully, we can answer other questions during the discussion session. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Rear Admiral Mahmoud Anwar Islam, for again for bringing up so many important issues and very nicely complementing what Professor Shahab Inam Khan has already pointed out. So now we move on to the, I think, the most interesting part of the entire program, and that is the Q&A session. Thanks to the three brilliant presentations which we have had, I'm sure that a lot of questions have cropped up. Before I open the floor for question answers, my request to the audience is, please introduce yourself before you ask the question, number one. Number two, I would request, since we are short of time and we would like to take as many questions as possible, let us try to go for questions instead of statements. I think that would be beneficial for all. Also, those of us who have logged in through Facebook, and as you know that this program is being streamed live, you can also post your questions, and we here at BIMRAD, we will be able to take those questions, and I'm sure that I shall be able to pass them on to the three presenters. So the floor is now open for question answers. Please introduce yourself and be brief. Thank you. Dr. Wahidul Alam, Oceanography, Chittagong University has raised a hand. Sir, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for nice presentation, especially Imtiaz sir, Khan sir, and Anwar Islam sir. So I have one question actually. Actually, though all guest lecturers said that to development or implement a regional framework is complex. But it is true. But we can take some lessons from some developing countries, especially United Nations Environmental Program under some regional SIS program. We can develop some lessons from the regional SIS program to implement the regional from the Bay of Bengal. You know, we have some Bay of Bengal, large many ecosystem countries, simply said that Boblimi countries. So because as I am working with some research regarding the marine pollution or marine environmental protection, and it's very tough to protect the marine environment, to control the marine pollution without implement regional framework because the transboundary problems. So transboundary problems is the major issues to protect the marine environment. So how we can implement? Now we should work how we can implement the regional program, regional framework in the Boblimi region, and then as well as the Indian Ocean region. Because marine pollution, one presenter said that plastic terrorism, actually, yes, it's like a plastic terrorism, because you know now if we cannot if we cannot control the plastic pollution, it's destroyed our total marine environment. You know, we are also
Sir, may I request you to ask this question specifically, and also if you would like to identify which of the panelists.
So actually my question and suggestion that how we can implement the regional framework in our Bay of Bengal region. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a Professor Dr.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So Professor Imtiaz, sir, but let me just take another question from from Dr. Lalufar Yasmin of the Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. Lalufar, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I have like two questions along with two observations for all of the speakers. First, thank you for such a sort of broad presentation about Bay of Bengal, covering traditional, non-traditional, and all the other areas. And especially, I want to thank Rear Admiral Anwar because you pointed out one blindness that we have while talking about Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean region, that we generally tend to follow global write-up, global trend that China has Malacca dilemma, but Japan and South Korea, they also have to a great extent this Malacca dilemma, something that I've started teaching in my class for last couple of months, that we often suffer from this blindness and we follow Western literature blindly, whatever they're saying. So this is one thing I think we need to talk about more here, that because of rise of China, we need not forget that how Bangladesh's geopolitical importance is to our Asian powers such as Japan and South Korea. And second one is that we, three of the speakers, you touched upon different areas of non-traditional security issues, but non-traditional security area as a threat to the Bay of Bengal region, as such, it did not, I felt that it should have been like prioritized a little bit more, as well as, for example, Shahab very rightly pointed out about pollution and how we need a regional cooperation on this, because pollution is not done in pollution done in the Bay of Bengal is not only the contribution of Bangladesh, but also other countries whose rivers are flowing through Bangladesh. So therefore, if you have any suggestions, any other areas to talk about, especially strengthening Bangladesh's deep sea fishing capacity and some of the other non-traditional areas which are related to trade as well as strategic issues. This is something I found that we need to sort of emphasize more while we're talking about Bay of Bengal in its entirety. Thank you very much.
You had questions. Did you have any questions?
I made 2-3 questions actually.
Oh, I thought these were observations.
No, 2-3 questions. Yeah, okay.
You would like to take the questions?
I think Imtiaz will start.
Okay.
Imtiaz,
Thank you.
If you would like to answer what the question which was raised by Professor Dr. Wahid.
Yes, Dr. Ahidul Alam. I think one way to start, and this is something that BIMRAD can also join in, and of course Dhaka University. And this is Bay of Bengal. This is the idea that I moved several years back, but I think it is now becoming quite relevant. This is Bay of Bengal Virtual University. I think the time has come to talk about and interact in a way beyond the national university curriculum and national understanding of Bay of Bengal. So one way to do it, and the pandemic has shown that this can be done, Bay of Bengal Virtual University, where you can bring the BIMSTEC countries all together. This is a proposal that was given earlier to BIMSTEC. They're still working on it, but well, Shahab seems to be quite, hopeful about BIMSTEC. But I always say BIMSTEC is a non-starter, and I will come to that why it's a non-starter. You see, one of the problems that we have why SAARC and BIMSTEC and BISIM really doesn't move, with all my respect for the economists, it's heavily economic-centric institutions for some reason. And when you have that, you start from scarcity. They all, the whole discipline of economics is, from scarcity. And scarcity is a serious psychological problem. I'm sure you're familiar with that. The more scarcity, the more fear comes. So I guess it is important for social scientists to get involved in this venture and not start with scarcity. I always say start with abundance. And that I think would be an interesting. The success of BRI in many respects, I would say, which almost, can be compared to the Marshall Plan. You see, both Marshall Plan and BRI, they're similar. People say the BRI is a bigger Marshall Plan. Marshall Plan started with abundance, not with scarcity. And that is how Europe developed. My argument would be similar with BRI, but somehow SAARC and BIMSTEC, we all took the trade, and the trade is scarcity. And because we produce the same thing. I'm sure the intra-trade did not go beyond 5% 20 years back, and it's still there. So to go back to the question that was raised by Dr. Alam, I would flag this idea of virtual Bay of Bengal Virtual University, where Chittagong University, Dhaka, BIMRAD, some of the extraordinary institutions that we have in the Bay of Bengal region, all together virtually connected. And this is where technology also would come. I think it's high time that we should flag that the next satellite that Bangladesh would be launching would have education linkages as one of the core issues. And that can be done. It's possible, which many countries have done it. So I see no reason that would allow the kind of classroom that we have to change almost overnight. And once you have a Bay of Bengal virtual university, you can actually then flag the pollution or something. I think we have heard about, well, the pollution terrorism, or something that we have heard that the Thai fisherman, literally having a free hand in Bay of Bengal. All those things with the Thai counterpart or the Thai scholars and Bangladesh and Myanmar and Sri Lankan, all together. So I see the way out would be to focus more on the intellectual alternatives and not really work on scarcity, because it doesn't take us that far. I'll stop here at this moment. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Shah, would you like to answer what?
Thank you, sir. I think I have a couple of points to raise. First of all, is the issue of BIMSTEC, as Sir has mentioned. I'm not too optimistic, but at least I see it as a platform where we get both the Burmese and the Thais to come and talk, and at least that is a platform at the state level where we can move forward to. But of course, like most of the multilateral agencies within South Asia, we do see limitations over there. But again, if we have an alternative platforms, probably, sir, we will be ending up with the same fate that we are seeing over there. And I think that the idea of abundance is perhaps something that should be fed into the policy planners to rethink about BIMSTEC, SARC, or whichever institutions we have. So that's one important aspect, sir. And the second is Lailu Farapa's point about the Malacca dilemma. And this is something that the academia or the policy planners should take into note. Rather than looking from the Western perspective or perhaps the Western narratives, we must look into this particular phenomena from our own perspective. That's why I was saying that when geopolitics, geostrategy, or geoeconomics comes from the territory of Bangladesh, I see it, there is a blurring space between geoeconomics and geostrategy for us. So the narratives might be different for the other countries. Another crisis that is coming up, and I think this is something Admiral Anwar and myself have talked about many times, and perhaps this can be a reference here, that see, the South China Sea, or perhaps the Indo-Pacific, is now seeing more extra-regional nuclear vehicles, transportation, and the military movement than ever. Now, that also gives a great fear that whether if there is some sort of accident, I mean, whether this is an accident of F-16 or MiG-21, or even there is a nuclear sub having collision. And we have seen the pockets of these stories quite often. And that makes another problem is the geopolitical competition, who bats for who. And that's where I think we should develop our own doctrine or narratives, where we should reinforce the very basic ideas of the nuclearization or denuclearization in the waters or our neighboring waters. And this is where exactly the fear of miscalculated missile fire can come in. And we don't want to see that. And perhaps there is, I think Admiral Anwar and Imtiaz Sir has perfectly brought into the whole discourse of strategic autonomy. And that should be the key feature of BIMRAD and Bangladesh's defense policy making, and definitely the political policy making in the years to come. And that's where I think Lailu Farapa's Malacca dilemma will largely be addressed if we start to talk about our own strategic autonomy and what would be the ecosystem of this particular strategic autonomy in the coming years. And I believe BIMRAD is in a fantastic position to really facilitate these discourses and dialogues, which are of paramount necessity in terms of our national interest. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Shahab. Rear Admiral Anwar, sir, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, quickly, one more point, 1 or 2 points. Thanks, Dr. Lailu. In fact, this whole thought started coming in when I was in the fleet. The Sonadia Deep Sea Port, the JICA project came in, and I was asked to give comment. And then I started thinking about it, why the Japanese are so interested to invest so much of money, what is the market, and so on and so forth. But now, after seeing that the Japanese and Koreans are coming, and a huge investment coming, so many SEZ, EZ is coming, why it is coming? And when the question of why comes in, I give a number of lectures in BGMEA when I was in port. I used to tell them one golden word that, look, by stitching short, you cannot make money anymore. It is the logistic chain management that you have to think about it, and nobody talks about it. And most of our universities in Bangladesh, they are preparing our students in MBS and BBS and clerks, but logistic is something that is not much talked about or much discussed. That is where we need to think, and how we think it, by creating a lot of research institutes. BGMEA, BKMEA, all these institutions must have their own research institutes. They must create those think tanks who will cut the cost. Who will cut the cost? For no, why Japan could have do this investment in Vietnam, in other places, but they have this this Malacca dilemma and all these sea problems, South China Sea problem. So that's why they have chosen Bangladesh. So I'm sure by doing so much of research, these institutes must have their own research organizations, those corporate institutes, and I have seen them in many countries in Europe. And there is a suggestion that I would like to offer it to the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
May I add one point, sir?
Shahab, we already have 4 questions. People from the audience waiting with questions. I'm sure that in the next round of answers, you can highlight the point which you would like to make. Okay, sorry for this. We now have I can see 4 participants who have raised their hands. Let me take the first 2, and then I'll come back to the others. Commander Nuruzzaman from Coast Guard, if you would like to go ahead with your question, please.
Sir, thank you very much, sir, for giving me floor, sir. I will ask a direct question to Sir Professor Dr. Shahab Inam Khan, sir. Sir, my question, sir, about the recently, sir, we are hearing about the Crimario 2 projects, sir, which are likely to work through the European Union. And their objective is to work on the critical maritime routes of Indo-Pacific, sir. Sir, my question is that, is there any benefit for Bangladesh from this project we may get, or Bangladesh should join or attach somehow within this project, sir? Thank you very much, sir.
Shahab, can you just give me 1 second? I would like to hear another participant, and then you can answer the question. Rubaiyat Saibu from Bangabandhu Maritime University.
Sir, thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Sir, thank you, sir. Sir, I was listening to Imtiaz, sir, and he's correctly pointed out that the BIMSTEC is a non-starter to begin with. So, sir, my question is that what we have seen in the Rohingya issue, that BIMSTEC has been nothing but a silent player, that we haven't able to use BIMSTEC as a platform to raise this issue and to get some tangible I would say solution from this platform. And another thing is that there are many talks about BIMSTEC, FTA, and many countries, for example, Thailand has raised this issue that BIMSTEC, FTA will benefit India and Indian professionals more than any other country. So is BIMSTEC is basically a India's hegemonic vehicle? Is it like a bargaining chip with ASEAN? And if it is, then smaller countries like, for example, Bangladesh, how can we basically extract any benefit from this organization? Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. If the panelists would like to answer the questions, and then I already can see 3 raised hands, and I'll come back to them very quickly. So, Shah.
Yeah, can the question be repeated by the?
Which one? The first one?
Yeah.
Commander Nuruzzaman, kindly, if you would like to.
Because I missed it out.
Sir, no problem, sir. I'm just directly asking the question, sir. Sir, recently, sir, we are getting many information about Crimario 2 project, sir, which is backed by the European Union, sir. Their objective is to work on the critical maritime route of Indo-Pacific, sir. So my question is that, sir, is there any benefit for Bangladesh if we like to join, or if we like to attach with this project, sir? Thank you very much, sir.
I think if I understand that particular project is more to do with the critical, what I call critical maritime route, and which is much more in line with the European project to interlink itself with the Indo-Pacific. At least with the very vague information that I have, I don't really find much controversies in that, essentially because we have our own national interest to define through this particular line of communication. And probably this is something that we need to have a greater discussion at some point of time. So therefore, my simplistic comment, and perhaps this comment might well be wrong, given the very little information that is available with us, is that probably this will have an economic benefit for us, and then perhaps to ensure the stability factors. Because the point that I wanted to add earlier actually also complements your question, is the idea of the freight. If you listen to Admiral Anwar, Sir has clearly said that it is not only about the strategic, but also economic. If you look at the moment, the freight price, and our energy comes through cargo ships, and the post-pandemic and the pre-pandemic difference of the freight price is 120 times higher. So we are now paying much more higher price to get our oil and other resources to come to Bangladesh and to go abroad as well. On the other hand, there is also a crisis. Whenever a crisis like Ukraine comes in, the insurance costs go up. So therefore, I think we really have to rethink about all these economic sides of our commercial maritime relationship with other countries. And perhaps this is exactly where this particularly Crimario would come up. And perhaps I would request BIMRAD to look into that, and we can hold perhaps a good discussion, because this is again linked with the policy choices that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahab. Sir, would you like to answer the questions?
Yeah, well, very quickly on Rubaiyat's question. You know, you cannot, the reason why
Sir, we can't hear you, sir. স্যার আপনাকে শোনা যাচ্ছে না? We are trying to contact Imtiaz sir. In the meantime, Anwar sir, apni ki, would you like to answer any of the questions which were raised by the two participants?
Not really. Not really.
Okay,
no, not really. Let's take the third question, because joining in such projects, there is nothing wrong in it. But I always believe international such projects are always gives you some kind of benefit.
So we have, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Yeah, I just got anyway. Now that you can hear me, yeah, the electricity went out. Anyway, on the question of Rubaiyat's, you know, the point why I'm critical of BIMSTEC or any organization starts with a negative, you know, understanding of the world. BIMSTEC, one can easily see it was to put off China, or, you know, it has an anti-China element. You can't have an organization working positively and productively if it plans to counter something. That has always been the case, and I can argue with most of the you know, institutions. The reason why European Union succeeded because it did not really have a negative connotation, whereas NATO is having a problem because it is countering something from the beginning. So that's one way of looking at it. Why BIMSTEC is a non-starter. I think it's important if in the future, and I argued that several years back, when 20 years celebration, I remember in Agartala, when BIMSTEC invited me to speak there, I pointed out that it's high time that you make BIMSTEC plus, you know, you can even SARC, I would say you should invite other countries, because if you think that you want to build SARC against some other countries, it doesn't work. So that's the principle, and this has a civilizational context to it. You know, you don't cooperate in order to harm any or to counter someone. You want to cooperate so that everyone can develop. It may look very idealistic, but that's what I think I'd like to flag here. The second point, I think, very quickly, because this has been, we have talked about geopolitics. I think when we talk about geopolitics, the very understanding is geopolitics of conflict. And this is because of the history. It doesn't matter whether you talk about, whether you read Rudolf Zelen or whether you read Mahan or whether Karl Hosofer, their understanding of geopolitics emerged out of conflict. And my point here, and this is the reason why I ended with the blue hub, is geopolitics of cooperation. I think we need to change the very understanding of geopolitics from geopolitics of conflict to geopolitics of cooperation. It's not easy to do it, I can understand. People would bring Geo-Economics and other things to push something different. But I think if we can flag that there can be geopolitics of cooperation and not the legacy that geopolitics carries, then I believe that the chances are that we can make good use of globalization at the same time and have a win-win situation. Don't forget, when geopolitics emerged in the early 20th century, there was no globalization, absolutely no globalization. And it had to do controlling either the sea with Mahan, it was sea, with Mackinder and others, with the land and heartland and other things. So my argument here would be, particularly those are students of IR, to transform a concept from conflict to cooperation. If we can do that, I believe Bangladesh is in a very absolutely in a strategic position. And I flagging some of the things that Rear Admiral Anwar has done it. Cost cutting effective. This is something that we just started working with just 3 days back. We started a project. Hopefully it will emerge. This is Cambridge University, Dhaka University, and Malaysian University, all into looking into business opportunities where you don't raise the cost, but you can create an efficiency. And there's a model to do it where you can raise the efficiency, but cut the expenses. Almost a 30 to 40%, whether it's in energy, whether it's in the material, even on the issue of water. So, you make the same genes, but you do certain things where you cut the water that is required for producing genes. As you know, genes take a lot of water. So my point here is this is the alternative. This is the creative element. And I go back to my position that if we can have a Bay of Bengal virtual university, some of the things that we have flagged here, I believe can easily be promoted. You're muted.
Sir, sorry. We are now moving on to the third and final round of questions. I have 3 questions. The first is from Dr. Azam Chaudhry, Oceanography Department, University of Dhaka, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Azam Chaudhry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I'm Azam Chaudhry. I am working as the chairman of the Department of Oceanography, University of Dhaka. Sir, it was a nice session, and all of the speakers are so knowledgeable about the strategy and geopolitics. So shortly, I will ask 2 questions. First one is that there is a term like ABNJ, that is the area beyond national jurisdiction, or the BBNJ, that is the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. So, sir, this area is very important with respect to the security, with respect to the hazard, or even the resources. So is there any information who is working on that, and what is the status of these issues? And second question is that, though this question is difficult to answer, but even though we can have some answer, like so many organizations or institutes that are working, like in the Bay of Bengal, for example, the BIMSTEC, Quad, BRI, and IUC Westpac, even IORA, and recently we see that IUC Indio is chaired by the Bangladesh now. So these organizations are working here, and we know that there are some overlapping scopes and countries are there. So for the benefit of the Bangladesh, actually which organization is very closely working for Bangladesh now? How to define it? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azam. Can I now move on to Rokibul Amir? Sir, if you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you. And thank you, BIMRAD, for inviting me and organizing such an interesting discussion. And thanks to all three presenters for bringing a very vibrant discussion points. I have a very specific question, considering the shortage of time. Professor Inam has mentioned about the fisheries and other issues, a natural part of this ocean system, and Rear Admiral Anwar has very specifically mentioned the ocean. If I summarize, ocean as a natural system, and any denting of this system would hit us back. Considering the twin challenges we are facing now, the biodiversity loss and climate change, and how whether we can take it in today's discussion, like this two twin challenges as a security threat for the country, like the Admiral Anwar has mentioned. I mean, the way he presented, I really liked it. He really hit the nails. But transforming from his personal knowledge into kind of an institutional process, like our security forces take biodiversity and security and climate change as a security issue, a security threat for Bangladesh. How do we want to do that? And whether BIMRAD want to play that role? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Afnan, who is a student of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Maritime University, to ask the question. Afnan, the floor is yours.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, Chal. And thanks a lot to give me this nice floor. I have a question specifically. Is Rohingya crisis economical or religious or geopolitical? If it's a geopolitical game or issue, I think China and India are mostly involved in this geopolitical issue. Then why we are not take strong diplomatic contact with them to solve this problem? Or there is a big issue or the big problem? I want to hear from the respective of all the speakers. This question.
Thank you, Afnan. Captain Najmul, and I know that I can see a lot of hands raised also on Facebook, but unfortunately, due to the constraint of time, Captain Najmul's question is the last one, and then we can move on to the next phase of the program. So, Captain Najmul, please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Thank you very much. Very thoughtful discussion was going on, and I was wondering regarding the track to diplomacy in regards to the marine environment of Bay of Bengal, in focusing Bangladesh part. So far, we have many contentious issues with Myanmar, but apart from those issues, can we really pursue for track to diplomacy in regards to the marine protected area, which just has been declared in St. Martin? And if we can engage Myanmar to declare another marine protected area adjacent to St. Martin, since it demands the biodiversity condition, it demands another marine protected area up there. So now if there could be a transboundary marine protected area by both Bangladesh and Myanmar, then I think that would be an achievement for cooperation, and it will also beef up the security issues. So I want to hear the comment from Imtiaz sir, and also Rakib, Mr. Rakib, and also the other professor who has been talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I request Professor Imtiaz to address some of the issues which have been raised in the questions, and then I will move on to the other two panelists. Sir, to kind request to sir briefly, because
thank you
by 1 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very briefly, let me start with Captain Nazrul's point, whether we can do whether we can engage with Myanmar, differently. This has always been a question for us for, at least for last 3 years. Almost 2 decades back, I remember flagging this idea that we should start giving Myanmar researchers and students a fellowship without any reciprocity. And I'm talking almost 2 to 3 decades back. I remember at least 2 decades back for sure. If we had given fellowship, and I'm sure Rear Admiral Anwar must have heard me saying this in NDC several times. If we had done that for last 20 years, just imagine the kind of people we would have inside Myanmar. I think we lost a golden opportunity of not doing that. We are so West biased. We are not East biased. That's the problem. We always look towards the West. We don't look at the East. We don't see. Even when the UNCLOS, this maritime judgment came, I remember someone from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs calling me to, called me to give the good news, and I immediately said, tell the Foreign Secretary to, say that let's work together. Let's work together, and let's try to create a Bangladesh-Myanmar Maritime Institute where students from Myanmar and Bangladesh will work together. But within 3 hours, we came to know instead. কি বলা হয় বিজয় হয়েছে সমুদ্র আমরা সমুদ্র বিজয় করেছি I think that was the line and I think that put off I remember talking to Myanmar ambassador in that week, and he said that put them off quite, because whose bijoy was that? Everybody's bijoy, but then Samudra Bijoy slogan started from one quarter, and that really stopped. So yes, track 2 can be done, but we need to invest in track 2. It's not too late of anything. I think even now, I think it's if we can start bringing, because they have very negative ideas about Bangladesh. They hardly know what Bangladesh is all about. Even with the Myanmar on the Rohingya issue, I've said let's have some television channel or radio channel in Myanmar languages. In Burman languages, so that they would know what is happening in Bangladesh. They know so little of Bangladesh that they all have negative. They literally think Bangladesh is poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So, and that I think we need to change. On the other question on Dr. Azam Chaudhry on this area beyond national jurisdiction, I think some movements have been there on the UN, idea of what you do. Beyond, I think you need to have the collaboration, of course, of the great powers who have much more access to those areas. But I don't think it has been finalized. Only that we look at the ocean as common resources, as global resources. But I think it's time for even Bangladesh to start thinking and putting what could be some of the commonalities that the rest of the world would accept, but nothing concrete has come on that unless Rear Admiral Anwar has much more updated news on this area beyond national jurisdiction. I'll stop here.
So I don't have any. Whatever you said, that is absolutely true. But I will request you, sir, there's Afnan, a young boy from Maritime University, one of my students. He asked you a question. I think if you answer him, the young kids will be encouraged.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Afnan. Yeah. No, I don't think we should start from geopolitics. It has a very domestic context with the Rohingya in Myanmar. They were never given the identity that is required. The reason why they don't do that is 2008 constitution, where one of the clause which is very critical, and that is, as you know, they're altogether 135 national or ethnic groups that they have recognized, but not Rohingya. In the 2008 Myanmar constitution, they have this provision where if there are 2 consecutive villages with the same ethnic community of 50,000 people, so that would be 100,000 people, they would get autonomy, and that is what is creating the problem, because the moment Rohingyas are given the identity or recognized, they would be getting the autonomy, which a lot of Myanmar politicians and scholars think that would introduce the Sharia law and Islamic law and etc. And that will jeopardize the Buddhist identity. Well, they're making a politics out of it, no doubt, because now, as you know, those who are pro Aung San Suu Kyi, they are ready to give some recognition to the Rohingyas. But more importantly, when Myanmar went to ICJ and when Aung San Suu Kyi also was there, not for once they mentioned that the Rohingyas are illegal migrants or they are Bangladeshis or Bengalis. Not for once. Throughout the deliberation, Myanmar, including Aung San Suu Kyi, said they are Arakanese Muslims. Since they are Arakanese Muslims and Arakan is not part of Bangladesh, so they have to go back to Arakan tomorrow. So I guess that's where we are. Of course, you can bring the geopolitical issues, but now I think you have seen with the Ukraine conflict, with the UN General Assembly voting, Myanmar actually voted in favor of the US-led resolution where Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan abstained. So Myanmar voting for United States tells you that not always they listen to what China says. So there is much more complex than that. But I will rule out the linear relationship between Rohingya and geopolitics. I think it has more to do with the domestic context. And then, of course, you can bring geopolitics into it. But I think the resolution lies how quickly Myanmar population or Myanmar state will reconcile this issue that they have in 2008 constitution. Once they do that, once they have the identity, I see no reason why the Rohingyas would not be eager to go back. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Professor Shahab Inam Khan, would you like to answer? There's a question particularly, Shahab, please remember what Mr. Rakibul Amin pointed out. Correct. So if you would like to.
That's precisely the one that I wanted to address this particular in the session, because Imtiaz has highlighted absolutely the points, probably Admiral Anwar, and I would agree. Now here is a very important thing that is coming up next week is the water quality monitoring of water courses located in transboundary shared catchments in Bangladesh. So this is what World Bank is going to launch next week. That also tells you that there is some sort of collaboration going on. And in fact, Professor Imtiaz Ahmed and myself were involved in the capacity building of the hydro engineers in understanding the water resources and the maritime resources. And we've delivered a number of lectures with the assistance of the World Bank and IUCN, in fact, to capacity building. And because if you look at the whole discourse that we have, one of the fundamental problem is the human resources. And we have highlighted the necessity for research, knowledge-based understanding of the Bay of Bengal, in which I think institutions like BIMRAD and IUCN can certainly come together to really educate the practitioners who deserves that. And the second important thing is there was a number of initiatives taken by the World Bank for hydro diplomacy. So we're now shifting from hydro engineers to hydro diplomacy. And in that case, perhaps we needed not only for Bangladesh, but in that case, when it comes to hydro diplomacy, it has to be with the water sharing countries too. So I think this is where I believe that a greater understanding is needed. And when you talk about the civil society incorporation in the whole spectrum of capacity building, we often forget that everything becomes very Dhaka-centric. And in that case, I believe if you don't include the fishermen to come and talk, those who would go to the deep sea, or perhaps the coastal people who are the first recipient of any kind of climate change or perhaps any kind of disaster that would loom in the coastal areas. This is the people they should come, and the local representative should come and interact with the greater group of people who has been in the forefront of policymaking, or perhaps gives inputs to the policymaking. And I think that's where IUCN and international agencies would be essential, because they have the resources and we do have the resources, and the collaboration of these resources can create fundamental differences in our discourse and narratives. I think this is where I think Rakib Bhai should look forward to, and cooperate with BIMRAD, or BIMRAD perhaps open their door for IUCN's cooperation. And the last point, I think what is very important at the moment about ABNJ, the problem with ABNJ is it is not always within the national territory, of course. And when it is not in the national territory, the obligations are not always binding. And that's where the problem is. There is a compounded, this whole problem starting from shipping to pollution to deep sea fishing or even mining, all compounded because there is a lack of comprehensive legal instruments and coherent governance. And that's exactly where I think this discussion has its merit in rethinking that what kind of instruments we have in our hand if we want to really protect the ecosystem that we have. Even if there's such pollution, terrorism won't go away unless we have a coherent governance, which would require understanding, which Admiral Anwar has said that the dialogue should not be dominated by the big brother attitude, or perhaps it should have the equitable, equal, and of course, with the national interest as the priority. But when we talk about national interest, cannot be delinked from the interest of the public across the borders, wherever the border is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shahab. Rear Admiral Anwar Islam, sir, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, one point, sir. The security, maritime security is directly related with the national development, no doubt about it. But security providers, practitioners, and it must be done in line with the business community, maritime community, infrastructural development community, and of course the governance. And we are doing it in Bangladesh in a segmented way. If we can do things together, I'm sure the kind of scenario that we see, which we have not seen in the last 30 years, what we see in last 10 years or 5 years, I'm sure in the next 5 years' time, things will definitely change, and we have to be together and make new plans, sitting together, listening to them, and design a security architecture, starting from national security policy up to a maritime strategy and then naval strategy. That will take us through. But at the last point is, if I have the headache, I have to take paracetamol, not anybody else. I have no. So the problem is ours, and we have to resolve it. And we have the capacity, financial ability, and the resources to do it. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, the speakers. We have now entered the last leg of our program, and the onus lies with me to sum up what has been discussed today. Just a few points and just to highlight what have been discussed today. Throughout the world, discussions about maritime issues usually tend to focus on the Atlantic Ocean. And of course, when you talk about the Atlantic, the Mediterranean comes in, and of course, the Pacific Ocean with the South China Sea. There are endless discussions on emerging conflicts, geopolitical maneuverings, the flow of refugees, the competition over hydrocarbons, as well as the geopolitical importance of the quote-unquote major oceans. Yet, as the 21st century comes over us, this is going to be the century about the Indian Ocean than either of the two. And sooner we realize this, the better. Let us look at why this is so. And again, Dr. Imtiaz has pointed out during his very first presentation that the Indian Ocean, while it is admittedly smaller than the Atlantic and the Pacific, it consists of nearly a quarter of the waters on the globe. So across its vast expanse, about 50% of all the world's shipping, containers, and 70% of all oil make it quite literally the crossroads of globalization. So everything passes through the Indian Ocean. There are nearly 40 nations border it with more than a third of the world's population. So again, this is something which we need to take into consideration whenever we talk about the geopolitics of the oceans. Another very important thing, which I think both Rear Admiral Anwar and Professor Shahab pointed out, and this was again raised by Professor Lalipur also, we also need to take the traditional security aspect of the Indian Ocean into consideration. The geopolitics of military nuclear weapons, this is something which is very important. And why this is so particularly for the Indian Ocean, let me remind the audience that this is a highly militarized and this region is constantly in a state of high tension. The highest potential nuclear conflict in the world today, if you remove the Ukraine crisis right now, is between Pakistan and India. Two huge, capable, professional, and nuclear-powered militaries and navies, ladies and gentlemen. Nuclear weapons have gone to the sea as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned. We need to remember this. I think it was Professor Shahab who pointed out, and also Professor Rear Admiral Anwar who pointed out the danger of nuclear escalation. Again, let me remind the audience, just earlier this week, cruise missile, or was it a BrahMos, which went off track and it fell on territory of a South Asian country. This is something which we are talking about. So when you have tactical nuclear weapons in the sea, when you have nuclear weapons both on land and sea, and there is this accident which can happen all of a sudden, we need to be concerned about this. So geopolitics is not only about economic issues, it is not only about non-traditional issues, but hardcore military issues also need to be taken into consideration. At the same time, let us not forget that there are other flashpoints centered in the Indian Ocean beyond India and Pakistan. There is no love lost between China and India in the region, particularly as China continues to expand its commercial and basing throughout the Indian Ocean littoral. Many nations along the littoral have internal conflicts. We have been hearing about Myanmar a lot, and of course, significant chaos along their borders. We ourselves are affected by what is happening in a littoral country of the Indian Ocean region. Piracy, while reduced over the past few years, remains a threat both along the east coast of Africa and the Strait of Malacca, connecting the Indian Ocean with the Pacific. In the Persian Gulf region or the Arabian Gulf region, sectarian conflict continues to play out at sea as it does ashore. Yemen is on fire. Again, I would like to congratulate particularly Admiral Anwar for pointing this out. The Houthi rebels as the seek dominance over Yemen, the implication this has for particularly the Arabian Sea, the straits which are located in this area. This is again something very important. So I would like to just end by saying this: we need to factor in the huge Indian Ocean. There will be greater impact from this here to less protected, but still enormous body of water. And we will find the Indian Ocean less domesticated than its two twin cousins, that is the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. However, the geopolitics of the Indian Ocean as it unfolds will be a crucial vector for the overall trends of the 21st century geopolitics. This is something we need to remember. And please, again, points which were raised particularly by Rakibul Amin, if you look at the environmental catastrophe which is taking place right now, if you look at the plastic pollution, the fishing, and the way these are being affected, these are also going to have tremendous impact upon geopolitics, geoeconomics of the Indian Ocean region, and we need to take all these into consideration. So saying this, ladies and gentlemen, I would now request Captain Minarul Haq, Director General BIMRAD, to have concluding remarks and of course give the vote of thanks. So over to you, Captain Mina.
Thank you, Professor Rashid, for giving me the floor again. Respected keynote speaker, panel discussion, moderator, participants, and August gathering. Assalamu alaikum and good noon. In the last 2 hours and 25 minutes, we have heard a very vibrant and enlightening discussion, because today's discussion represents a very pertinent issue for Bangladesh and global actors in this current geopolitical context. The keywords of today's webinar are geopolitics and geoeconomics. which are the driving force for any nation. As I've said before, Bangladesh being a maritime nation it depends on her only maritime gateway region, and more specifically, the Bay of Bengal region has to be taken into consideration. Geo-economic infrastructures have geopolitical implications in the region.
You are muted.
Sir, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, sir. Moreover, the developing geo-economic infrastructures have geopolitical implications in the region. Without any doubt, there are many significant security challenges in the maritime area of concern. And as mentioned earlier, we are also experiencing geopolitical dynamics being changed around the globe. In this context, the objective of this webinar was to discuss the present state and challenges of geopolitics in the Bay of Bengal region, and being a maritime nation, how it fits in our policies. Distinguished guests, today's discussion was very fruitful. The speakers who have expertise on the given topics have deliberately presented their findings and perspectives before us. We are enlightened to know many findings and new ideas that have certainly broadened our views on the changing geopolitical trends in this maritime region. The moderator of the webinar has aptly summarized the whole discussion, so I'm not going to repeat those things. As I mentioned before in my welcome speech, Bangladesh believes in peaceful coexistence among the regional and global actors in the Indian Ocean region. Therefore, it is pertinent to understand the geopolitical dynamics of the area and situate them in the context of Bangladesh. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Chairman BIMRAD, I would like to thank all the participants, speakers, and discussants for attending this webinar. It has been an excellent opportunity for us in BIMRAD to bring together a group of experts on the geopolitical issues of Indian Ocean region. We strongly believe that the perspective of today's webinar would help us in advancing some important policy recommendations in terms of protecting Bangladesh interest in the Bay of Bengal. As the home of maritime think tank, BIMRAD intends to make a substantive contribution in this field. In this regard, it has taken a timely effort to initiate constructive discussion and produce relevant policy recommendations through this webinar. Hope you have enjoyed the session. May the Almighty Allah help us to navigate through all the challenges of the coming days. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great day. May I now request the moderator to declare the closure of today's webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, the DG of BIMRAD. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar. I would like to thank all of you for joining us, and I wish you all a good day the rest of the day. So thank you. The session has ended.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.